Welcome to Q-MindBody. This is a podcast dedicated to gay men's wellness in every sense of the word. We talk about everything from physical health and well-being to emotional, spiritual, psychological, and even forming more healthy relationships. In today's podcast, I am going to be chatting with Karl Hebenstreit. We're going to be talking about the Enneagram, which is, well, I'll let him describe it in better detail, but a way of identifying our personality traits and how we interact with other people. A lot of us find ourselves in situations where our relationships are not jiving particularly well, and the Enneagram may give you some insight as to how to deepen those relationships, heal them, and so on. Before we get into this, I just want to give a shout out to the Gay Wellness website. I'm partnering with them. It's a directory of healers who specialize in working with gay men. And that can be anything from massage therapists and yoga teachers, coaches, psychotherapists, you name it. They're on there, and you can probably find somebody amazing in your area. I'll put a link to them in the show notes. Also in the show notes, I'm going to put a link to Karl's website and all of his social media stuff so you can follow him and find some of his books. And I'll put a link to all of my content as well, including my website and social media. Karl, welcome. So good to
Thank
see you,
you,
my old
Darren.
friend.
Great to see you too. Thank you for having me on the show.
You have been putting up with me for what, 15 years now?
Yeah, I don't think I'd call it putting up with. And I'm surprised that aren't you in the directory that you just mentioned? So all
I
your
am
information
in a
should already be.
directory, of
Yes, exactly.
course.
Yeah, for all the
Yes,
amazing services that you're providing.
yeah, I'm on every page.
As you should be.
um, well, let's talk about you and your amazing work. The Enneagram, it sounds like a big, weird name, and I think
Hmm.
many people have heard of it, but they might not know what it is. They might think
Yeah.
it's something like astrology or something
Mm.
like the Myers-Briggs test, or they
Yeah.
might just think it's some weird new agey term. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you could just say what it is in general, and then
Yeah.
we can dive into how it might be helpful for gay men specifically.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. And I think the way you described it is it's all of the above. It's actually a very ancient system. So I mean astrology is ancient as well. It's not necessarily, well, I guess you could relate it to astrology from the concept or the part that you are born with it. So you are at when you are born, you are predisposed to certain ways of dealing with the world. And astrology, I mean, I think would say the same thing that whatever your sign is has certain
Yeah.
characteristics or personality traits that go along with it. The
Well,
interesting
that's
thing
pretty
is,
consistent with modern psychology too. Like your personality is inherent. I mean, you come into the world with it,
yes,
and then
hmm,
you can't really change it. It's
no,
like little stripes on a tiger, right?
right. You can't change it. And I think the most important thing is to recognize what it is, because a lot of the first part of emotional intelligence development is self-awareness. So let's recognize where we're starting from. Let's recognize what we've inherited. And I think the other component is that your childhood has solidified that. So something in your childhood has solidified that this is the way that I'm going to approach the world right now. I've inherited some certain predisposition to this, and then my interpretation of this traumatic event or whatever it is now going to solidify that this is how I will survive through life, and this is my way of being motivated to do so. And I think that's the biggest difference that we could say about the Enneagram from all of the other systems is that it's a motivation typing system and it's part of your personality, because there are
Yeah.
different ways, 9 different ways, primary ways that people are motivated in this world. And we also have one of 3 different thinking styles, one of 3 different feeling styles, and one of 3 different action styles. And that's 3 times 3 is 9.
Um.
That's Enneagram
yeah,
for
Can
Enneagram.
I can I ask a question specific
Hmm.
to gay men already? I know I'm
Sure.
getting
Yeah.
the. I just thought of this as you were talking. So I believe that sexual orientation and gender identity, which is inherently complex, but that we're sort of born with that,
Yep.
a leaning toward a same-sex attraction or an
Hmm.
opposite-sex attraction, or maybe you were born with one set of parts, but it doesn't align with your
Yep.
gender identity. But we're sort of born that way.
Yes.
But there's also the family, the religion, the culture we're
Hmm.
born into. All of those things either celebrate who we are or in
Hmm.
many cases shame who we
Yes,
are inherently at birth.
absolutely. Yeah,
And I'm wondering how the Enneagram relates to that, because
it does.
there's what you're born with and then there's what you're greeted with
Yeah,
when you're
exactly.
welcomed into the world. So I'm
Yeah,
wondering how those two things overlap, if at all.
I think they do overlap a lot. So I think certain Enneagram styles are more celebrated and others are more misunderstood by families, society, the world. And so that's where the shame can come in. So we do see shame being involved in certain of the styles, even though that is the person. That's the person's the way they were born, and we need that diversity of motivation and perspective, and skills and just what they bring to the world. We need all nine of them. And sadly, you're absolutely correct. Society has deemed some of them more shameful than others and not as acceptable as others, even as Enneagram types. And we'll see that some of those types are very misunderstood.
Well, yeah, obviously, just what you've described already could be 10 podcasts to talk about all these different
Yes.
personality types and
Hmm.
thinking styles.
Hmm.
But I'm wondering if generally why it's important to know what my personality type is, what my thinking style is, and especially as it relates to
Mm.
dating or being in a more committed, longer term
Yeah.
relationship, or being in a relationship where things are getting a little tricky or
Yeah.
difficult, or we need to sort of re-examine some stuff or break up or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
wondering how this can be beneficial for gay men looking to relate to each other at any level.
So it's totally beneficial. That's a great question because we are all different. So there's diversity in every community. So none of us is the same as anybody else. We have different likes, dislikes, political ideologies, um, preferences, allergies, whatever it is. You can have all these different litany of different categories. There are so many differences that we have within us. If we were all the same, it wouldn't matter because then we would totally get ourselves and everyone else. But we are not all the same. And that's where finding out what makes us tick, what's important for us, what our drivers are is really important. That's a self-awareness component. And then figuring out the empathy component, which is, well, hold on a second, this is interesting. Why these other people don't seem to share my perspective, my likes, my ideologies, whatever it is, my mindsets. I wonder why
Mm.
that is. And then you start being curious about figuring out, oh, maybe there are in this situation, 8 other different perspectives or mind views or worldviews or whatever category you want to call it. So that's what's going to be helpful in navigating those challenging times that you described, that the other people aren't out to get you. They're not there to intentionally hurt you or miscommunicate or make you look bad or anything like that. It's just that they're looking at the world through a different lens and they may have slightly different values that again are part of the way that they when they were born. It's inherited. It's
Mm.
that nature component and then solidified through nurture, through whatever their childhood experience
Yeah.
was.
So let's say I start dating someone,
Hmm.
ever the optimist here. I find somebody that will go on a second date with me. Um,
I'm sure there's a
we'll get to the
long line.
long-term relationship later. Yes, it's a real burden. Um, obviously, there's certain personality types that are going to click well together, and
Yeah.
others that are not. And I'm wondering how much work should we invest in a relationship?
Mhm.
I mean, maybe it's a personal decision, but it
Yeah.
seems like some relationships are just destined for a lot of conflict or stress,
Hmm.
whereas others are going to be more effortless because of the two different personality types that
Yeah.
work well together. I'm wondering how how we sort that out, and when is the time to say, look, you're a beautiful person, just not my soulmate.
So,
Or wow, you're a beautiful person and you challenge me, but that's an opportunity for me to grow.
right. So I think it really depends on the healthiness of each individual. And I think ultimately any personality, any motivation style that is healthy with another person who is healthy. So they're in the same place, right? I mean, we sometimes talk about, oh, we're not in the same place. We don't want the same things. We're not moving in the same direction. But I think that's about healthiness. What is the healthiness level here? If we're both at a healthy level, if the two partners are at a healthy level, and healthiness means I'm not fixated in just my own world, I'm actually able to go out beyond my own perspectives and take on the perspectives of others and have that empathy, right? So I'm not always going to be looking at everything through the same lens and reacting exactly the same way, because I realize that's not appropriate.
Mm.
That's not how the world works. So when both partners have that same realization and are willing to tackle the world and partner with each other to tackle the world through that lens of helping each other and understanding each other and taking on different perspectives, I think that's ultimately where the healthiness is and where the relationship can thrive. If one partner is at a higher healthiness level, and by the way, they do fluctuate. We're not always going to be super healthy or super unhealthy. We're human beings. We fluctuate. Our AI hasn't taken over us yet to be able to make us one or the other, but we will fluctuate. But overall, if we're at the same healthiness level, then that couple will be able to really work well together, understanding that their own perspective is not the only perspective in the world. So that myopic selfishness, that self-centeredness, that arrogance that
Yeah,
my way is the only way goes away. And they are open to, there are
sure.
so many more different ways of experiencing and looking at the world. So when both
Yeah,
partners share that, I don't think it matters what the core motivation is. Both partners need to
yeah,
understand their own and the other partner's core motivation and understand that they can flex and
yeah,
look at the world through other lenses as well. And I think that's the ultimate one. So yes,
yeah,
some people will say exactly what you said earlier, that, oh, these two types are more likely to get along together because they share the same positive outlook or whatever it is. But the reality is, if one of them is healthier than the other in their development and their ability to access the other styles, they may still have lots of challenges.
yeah. Have you heard that joke about the guy who says, um, Siri, why don't women understand me? And the answer back is, this is Alexa.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
um,
Hmm.
so I have a question specific to the Enneagram, but before I get to that, I think our personality changes depending on the situation we're in. Like if you're in church, you might act one way. If you're at a gay bar, you might act another way.
If you're
You know what
healthy
I
and
mean?
understand that,
If
right? Some people don't. Some
and
people are exactly the same and fixated in one way.
That's sort of odd,
Yeah.
creepy. But
Yeah.
there's a through line, like you have an awareness of all of them. Like this
Hmm.
is Darren the yoga teacher, or Darren the
Hmm.
massage therapist, and Darren the
Hmm.
boyfriend, and Darren the father, and they're
Exactly.
all sort of integrated, but they're all sort of separate.
Hmm.
I think in modern times, and I'm going to speak specifically to the gay world of dating and hooking up and all of that,
Hmm.
we've added like this other space called online dating and hookups, the Grinder, Scruff,
Hmm.
whatever, Archer
Hmm.
apps that allow us to like. I would love to say it brings out the best parts of our personality,
Hmm.
but it seems like they tend to bring out the worst parts of our personality. That we
Yeah.
say and do things in those in that scenario that are,
Yeah.
you know, our shadow more than our light. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you have any thoughts about that, just because it is such a big part of how gay men connect and communicate with each other. And maybe
So
you
I
don't. I'm just wondering.
So I think the shame component that you mentioned earlier has a lot to do with that. And I think that the anonymity of having this, I can be whoever I want to be, right? And I'm gonna portray myself in a way that others will find me attractive, or I think others will find me attractive if I portray myself this way. And that's why I think you have some of those catfish schemes and people misrepresenting themselves. And and trying to figure out how can I connect with people? What do they want? Because perhaps they haven't had that success in real life, in meeting people where people see them for who they are, or can see them for who
Mm.
they are more easily rather than behind a screen with behind static pictures that they send, or whatever it is that they have in their profile. So I think that hopefully when, not if, but hopefully when people can remove the shame and accept who they are and know that people will love them for who they are, regardless of whether it fits a conventional stereotype of whatever society thinks someone should be, then that's part of it. That's really part of it. And I think that's where the Enneagram helps people to understand that people are going to love me for who I am, not for projections of who I think that they want me to be. Right.
Yeah.
And there will be many different people that are looking for exactly who you are, not this idealized fake projection of what society may want, especially if you're looking for a longer term relationship. If it's just a hookup and that it's a fantasy, right? That's a one-time fantasy thing, then that may work. That strategy may work. But if it's something that's going
Mm.
to be more long term, then I think you have to go more to the essence and to like who you really
Yeah.
are, and accept that and project that, and find the people that want who that is. And there are people who want who that is.
Well, it's interesting. Like when you talk about even the hookup, it's like when you're out there presenting, this is who I am
Mm-hmm.
on Grinder or whatever, and it's a fantasy version of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, if you actually get to the actual hookup, like meeting in the real world, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
you're nothing like what I thought,
exactly.
and that always feels good. That's always fun.
But it's also it's a person's self-esteem too. It's like if they're not comfortable with themselves and need to change the way that they project themselves or present themselves in the world, it's a sign of unhappiness or dissatisfaction with themselves, with the way
Yeah.
that they are. So accepting themselves for who they are is going to help break that, because you're absolutely right. That fantasy is dissolved when real life takes place.
Mm. Um, well, for people who are listening to this and thinking, yeah, I want more intentional relationships, whether it's just
Hmm.
a hookup or a friendship with other gay men or a life partner,
Hmm.
whatever, and they're thinking, hey, this Enneagram thing sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned astrology and stuff like that, where you'd go to an astrologer and they'd look at where your planets were and blah, blah, blah. This is different than that. This is, I would say, in my understanding, closer to like Myers-Briggs, where it's more of
Hmm.
an assessment that you do. I wonder if you
Yeah.
could talk about how somebody could find out where they are on the Enneagram and what
Yeah.
that means, and maybe a basic understanding of where other people might be,
Yeah. Thank you for that question. And there are
aside from reading your
so,
books, of course.
of course. And my books aren't necessarily meant to help you find out what your core type is. It's once you've found that out, or just exploring how can you use it. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Although you probably by reading them can get a pretty good idea of where you land. And
Yeah.
there are so many assessments and tests and Cosmo quizzes out there that what's your favorite nut, and I'll tell you what your Enneagram style is. That doesn't work that way. So you definitely want to go for something that's more validated, more tried and true. My favorite is the Integrative Enneagram Solutions. It's a South African company, and they have the most valid test. It's not free, but it does give you the right information. It does help you land on what your core type is, and shows you all these different other components of it. But seriously, the simplest way to do it is, and I found the simplest way to present it to people, is to just break it up into 3 different groups, because our core type is either going to be our feeling style, our thinking style, or our action or gut style. So, and then if you break it down into 3 components, 3 groups of 3, as opposed to one group of 9, and Enneagram is the 9 core motivation types, the archetypes, it's very simple. So for the thinking style, if you want to start with thinking,
Yeah.
there's the easiest way to look at it is the type 5 is the observer. They're the most logical. So they're looking at what's the data. Let me look at the good, the bad. I'm going to create this is the real thing. This is the data says that this is the way things are. Always looking at trying to figure out how to make sense of things, creating sense-making models so that they can predict how things are going to happen and they can be prepared and not look foolish. Now, that's the objective one. Then type 6 is going to be the loyal skeptic. So it's going to be looking at the world through, what's the worst possible scenario that can happen here? I need to figure that out, plan for it so I can be safe, comfortable, and secure. And by the way, where's my tribe? Where's the tribe that's going to keep me safe, comfortable, and secure? Right? So the type 5 is objective. The type 6 is worst case scenario. So the type 7 is best case scenario, looking at the world through what's the best possible thing that can happen? What can we take advantage of? What big picture, beautiful vision can we have for brighter opportunities for the future? So we have type 5, objective, type 6, worst case scenario, type 7, which is the epicure adventurer, is the best case scenario plan. So those are, people will look to access their thinking, their brains, through one of those three styles. So you can see if you're in a relationship.
Do people ever switch? I mean, we talked about it being more innate, but I mean, like, I think there's days where I think I'm generally in that more optimistic category. I'd like to think I am. But then there's days,
I see you in that
like, I
category
think
for
during the pandemic when I was like, it's all going to hell.
Yeah. Yes, because you're human. Sorry, I shouldn't have revealed that. Yes, you're human. You will fluctuate, but there's one that's your primary.
I didn't hear that, and I thought, oh my God, what has he revealed? Because if anybody could reveal career-ending information on me, it's probably you.
I'm not sure about that, but as human beings, we will flex and fluctuate, hopefully, between those three styles, but there will be one that is our dominant. Now, some people always stay in one. Some people are fixated and will only stay in one of those and will not access the other two. And therefore, they're not looking at the world as completely as people that are flexing and accessing all three of those thinking styles. And again, one of those will be your primary, your default, the one you go to first, more often.
So can that extreme optimist hang out with that extreme, the glass half full person, hang out with the glass half empty person, and can they flourish as a couple, as friends, or do they cancel each other out?
That would be interesting. So as long as both parties are healthy and can flex and see the other person's perspective and are open to that, yes, they can hang out and be successful. But if the optimist is always in optimist mode and the pessimist or the loyal skeptic is always in pessimist mode, that's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
They need to learn from each other. Plus, also look at the type 5, which is like, okay, let's look at the objective way and incorporate all three of those styles, and then they'll definitely understand each other better and flourish in that relationship. But if they're always looking at it through their own lens and not willing to look at the other way, then no, they will not. Okay. Now, is it easier for two people of the same perspective to be together? Probably. There are some teachers of the Enneagram that would say yes. If you find someone who shares the same,
that's why you and I get along so great, because we're both just rays of sunshine.
It's true. I think we do both. I mean, I don't know, and I'm not supposed to guess somebody's, as nobody else is supposed to guess your type, right? I definitely see a lot of 7 energy in you. I don't know if that's your core style, but I definitely see that as your thinking style more so than the 5 and the 6. So,
what are the other? You said action and emotion. What are the other?
So let's go to the heart next. So there are 3 different ways that people access their feelings. So for the type 2, which is the helper or giver, it's an externalized accessing of the heart. So always looking to see how they can help other people, putting down their own needs in favor of making sure other people's needs are met first. So there's a great power of intuition, intuitively knowing what other people need. And sometimes they get into trouble by giving when the person doesn't want to receive. So they're not open to the help or the contribution that the person wants, and may actually resent it. They're like, I didn't ask for this. Stop butting in, right? So that's the type 2, which is the helper or giver. Outwardly, accessing their heart through helping other people and putting their own needs down, not addressing those. The type 3 is much more geared towards knowing the situation, really reading situations really, really well, but having a goal in mind and really pushing down feelings in general, their feelings and other people's feelings, in order to get the goal met. So it's a suppression of feelings and needs in favor of, what's the goal here? I need to get this goal met because I need to look good. I need to be the best at whatever they've chosen to be best at. That's the type 3, which is the performer or achiever. And then the 4 is more introspective, taking in all the feelings, taking in all the emotions, being very empathetic, feeling not only their feelings, but everyone else's feelings as well. And they feel like they're the most misunderstood. Nobody else can understand them. And they're looking for authenticity and just to be genuine, to be special, different, and unique. They want to be acknowledged for that. They need to be totally different. They can't have the same job as everyone else. They have to be a unicorn. So those are the 3 different ways of accessing your heart. Is it outward to others, putting down your own needs? Is it inward, that's the type 2. The opposite of that would be like, I'm going to take in all the feelings and all the needs, and I know what my needs are, and I want to get them met, but I'm misunderstood by others. Or is it the one in the middle where it's like, forget the feelings, I need to get things done?
Yeah. Where does somebody with like a narcissistic personality disorder fall into all this? Because I would think like a narcissist would love dating that giving person. Like, yeah, I'll take everything you want to give. Like,
that could be a codependent relationship for sure. So there are some studies or some teachers that have done research into this and have assigned, like, if you're in the unhealthy version of each of these types, this is what will come out of that. And so the narcissism may be the type 3. Sometimes the narcissists are identified as the type 3s. They're also sometimes identified as the people who tend to overwork and take on too much and burn themselves out. Although, again, this could be true of any one of the types, but there's more of a tendency in an unhealthy version of type 3, you'll see that narcissism. That doesn't mean you can't see a narcissistic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All 9 types can have that, but you usually tend to see the unhealthy version of 3 would be the narcissist.
And what is that last, the action one?
So the action one are the last 3 types. So action could be through the lens of 8, 9, or 1. So for the type 8, which is the boss, protector, director, challenger, it's immediate. It's immediate action and and even delegation and accountability, but there's a focus on taking action. It's about power, control, and authority, and taking immediate action and execution. And they're also really good at protecting their people, whoever is in their inner circle, their families, their pets, their direct reports, their whatever it is, who's ever in their immediate circle, they're protecting them. The type 9 is the peacekeeper or mediator, and they're all about looking at the entire system and really thinking about, hold on, what are the connections here? Everything is equally valid and valuable. So we want to really think about taking action. Let's pause taking action to really consider everything before we take action and disrupt the equilibrium, because they're always looking at keeping the equilibrium and the status quo and not having conflict. So it's a type of action through inaction. They will take action, but the first focus is on, let's not disrupt things. Let's make sure that the action is necessary before we take it. And the type 1, which is the perfectionist or reformer, is looking at taking action in what's the right thing to do in this situation. What's according to their values, their morals, their ethics. What's the right thing to do? And that's how they will take action. So those are the 3 different ways of taking action. So have you yourself picked a favorite in each of those 3 areas? So you told me you liked 7, between 5, 6, and 7. So the optimistic way of thinking. In the heart center, between 2, 3, and 4, are you seeing yourself as more focused on other people's needs?
The focused on other people, I mean, by virtue of like the work I love doing, like doing body work, holding space in a yoga class, holding space as a coach. I mean,
absolutely.
in yoga we call it karma yoga or seva,
Hmm.
the act of selfless service, and it's a spiritual practice unto itself. And I've always
Hmm.
been more drawn to that. Like the purpose of meditation is to be better at service of alleviating
Hmm.
suffering.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely like a shoot from the hip, should I get off the pot type of the
Okay.
guy
So the
when
type
it
8.
comes to action. Yeah.
Yeah. So what?
I
So
try to
in.
be somewhat thoughtful about it, but
Mhm.
um, I don't like to wait too long before taking action.
Okay, great. And is that learned or
Yeah.
is that innate?
I don't know.
And that's the other question to ask for all three of those. Is this something that society has
Yeah.
expected of you, or your business, or
I
what
think it's
success has
definitely there
required
are
of you?
definitely qualities that I think have been fostered in me over time.
Right. Yeah.
And I look at like my mom and dad. My mom is very
Hmm.
empathetic, very emotional, very
Hmm.
caring and nurturing, and my father is like part Vulcan. He's
The
got this
logic.
incredible moral compass and sense of
Hmm.
decency about him, but
Hmm.
he's not super. He's not a hugger, put it that way.
Yeah.
He's
Okay.
more like, "Good job, son."
Yeah. So you can see him more in
That's what you're gonna get.
the one action style and maybe the five thinking style for your dad.
Yeah,
And again, that's totally for them to come up with it on their own.
yeah,
But that's what you're experiencing. That's what you're seeing, and we need to find out from them if that's the reality or if that's the situation
yeah.
that they're just flexing into or an overlay.
So
Hmm.
So I think as gay men, we're almost to the end of our time, and we'll have to do a whole nother episode to go even deeper into this. But
Absolutely.
I think as gay men, um, I think a lot of the experimenting we normally would have done, especially older gay men
Hmm.
over the age of say 35 or 40,
Oh my God. What does
where
that
we
make
weren't
me?
kind
Super old man.
oh,
Ancient
we're
man.
both members of the Crypt Keepers Club.
Let me get my cloak.
Um, but I think like young kids today are coming
Hmm.
out earlier and earlier, and so
Yeah.
they're sort of having their dating in middle school and high
Yeah.
school, and figuring out like who am I and what am I supposed to be and what is my place in the world. And I think a lot of gay men who came out later, even in their early 20s, there's
Yeah.
that arrested development. And so I think having a map like the Enneagram for both dating and just self-awareness is
Yeah.
really, really powerful.
I totally agree with you. And I do fall in that category of coming out in my 20s, mid 20s, actually. And I wish I
Mm,
had known the Enneagram back then. That would have made life a lot
yeah.
easier, and I would not made half the mistakes that I made. And
Yeah.
yeah, I would have been a
One of my
much better
son's
person.
one of my son's friends from grammar school just came out. He's 14. And
Wow.
and when I found out, I mentioned to my son, he's like, yeah, I knew that.
Hmm.
Just like his eyes are blue or whatever.
Yeah.
Just like this, like, oh yeah, whatever.
I love how
It's just
kids
such a
these days.
non-issue. Like,
Yeah.
but for us, it was risking your life. So it's. I
Yeah.
think this sort of the way we will integrate into wellness, psychological, emotional, relationship
Hmm.
wellness will be different with each generation of gay men.
Yeah.
So Karl, I'm gonna add your website to the show notes, but maybe you could say your
Thank you.
website in any way people could get in touch with you,
Sure.
interact with you. I know your books aren't specific to gay men, but maybe you could just briefly say what they are, and I
Yeah.
will link to them as well.
So, just for one quick point, the children's book has some gay characters and even a non binary. There's a gay character, a lesbian character, and a non binary character in it. And what I found
Look
out,
at you all
I
progressive and
know,
woke.
it's trying, I'm trying. And the interesting thing that I'm finding is when 10-year-olds, and that's probably the right age, they pick up on it immediately. But like you said, it's a non issue. They're like, oh, yeah, it's a non binary character. It's not a he, it's not a she, it's a non-binary character, and they just accept it and they move on. It's not an issue for them at all, which I am so happy to see.
Yeah.
So
My son
the
is like that with pronouns. I'm forever screwing up pronouns.
Yeah.
If somebody changes or goes to they, them, not that I
Mhm.
don't want to support them. I just,
Right.
my brain is sort of wired for one binary
Exactly.
way of seeing the world, and my son is like, Dad.
Well, it's before we reached crypt keeper status, we have to
Yeah.
rewire all this stuff from pre-crypt keeper status to now. So it totally
Yeah.
makes sense, and I know the intent is pure. So
Yeah.
yeah, so my website is Perform and Function. So it's a play on words like form and function. It's performandfunction.com. And people can
Nice.
also reach me through LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn is probably a little bit more difficult. It's Karl Hebenstreit, and it's Karl with a K. And well, actually, you can have my name right there. So if people go to LinkedIn, it's Karl Hebenstreit. That's my LinkedIn. And yeah, you can easily email me through
Yeah.
Karl, Karl, at performandfunction.com. But I'm looking
Nice.
forward to hearing from everyone and anyone about any questions you may have. And I do believe that the Enneagram is a great way for self-awareness, emotional intelligence building, and really helping to be effective in our relationships.
I'm just going to put this out there. I don't know of one. One may exist, but I'm not familiar with it. But I think your next book should be about gay men. I think it would be really.
Yeah, I don't think
I
one
would
does
read it.
exist. Yeah, and I would
I
have
would
to.
read it. I would be your official gay mom and read it and give you a good review on Amazon just because
Yes, thank
you
you.
can do no wrong, sweetie.
Thank you, Mom, Dad,
Okay.
Mama
Karl, thank
Darren.
you so thank you so much for joining us today on the Q-MindBody
It's my
podcast.
pleasure.
Just
Thank you, Darren.
again, I'm going to post links to everything in the show notes so you can get in touch with Karl and his books and everything else. I have coaching groups for gay men as well as other things, yoga and all the other stuff I mentioned. If you'd like to be more connected to this community, there is a Facebook group that you are welcome to join and put out your own thoughts and suggest topics for future episodes. And we're going to be doing some live groups as well, both online and in the real world. So definitely connect with us so that you can be aware of when that is happening. Again, it was so great to chat with you, Karl, and I will see you all in the next episode.